Hey, welcome back, podcast friends. And I am so excited to introduce you to this next guest. This is Mike Collins, and I call him the sugar addiction specialist. And so this is all about sugar addiction, carbohydrate addiction. I get, kind of the same thing. But just so you know, Mike Collins believes that sugar addiction is very real and not to be taken lightly. As a person in long term recovery from substance use disorder of 39 years, he took a keen interest in what sugar was doing to him and his friends in early recovery. After much research and experimentation, he quit sugar with the help of amazing mentors. He then raised two children sugar free from the womb to 6 years old. And as they grew, he rewrote the rules for sugar and kids in childhood. He takes the stewardship of sugaraddiction.com and quitsugarsummit.com very seriously and aims to provide information and community for anyone wanting to curb or quit sugar. Hundreds of thousands have read his book, The Last Resort Sugar Detox, and tens of thousands have completed his online 30-day sugar-free challenge. So now I want to introduce you to Mike Collins, and thank you so much for offering to be on this podcast. We're so excited about this.
Steve, Theresa, thanks for having me. It's an honor. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess just to get us started right off the bat, what got you into sugar addiction in the first place? What was the main emphasis that made you go from whatever you were doing to what you're doing now?
No, I appreciate it. So, as I said, I got sober almost 40 years ago now, and I was wanting to get healthy, basically. And I guess it really starts a generation back where my mother was my favorite sugar junkie, and I just grew up on sugar.
Yep.
I've come to believe over time that it is the original gateway drug that all addicts and people start with, right?
Yeah. Yep.
My mom's story is that her mother died. My grandmother died when she was only 8 years old, and they had to move in with my great aunt, who was not the nicest person in the world.
Well, I hope she's not listening to this.
She was not anyway, my grandfather had to work all the time. And so they owned the country store across the way. It was a unique setup. My great aunt owned a rural hospital where they delivered babies and stuff. It was kind of wild. But anyway, anytime my mom walked into that store, my grandfather made a deal with his cousin Jim that she could have anything she wanted, any kind of candy, and put it on his tab. And so she began equating sugar with love. And that's how I grew up. Okay. Just unbelievable amounts of access to sugar. And she would bake and have candy all the time. And it was, she just believed that. I believe she died thinking that, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so anyway, just fast forward, I read a book after I got sober called Sugar Blues, right? Uh-huh. Sugar Blues by a guy named William Duffy. And Duffy was married at one time to Gloria Swanson, the famous movie star, right? He was very famous. He tells a story in the book that he was at an event and he was putting 2 lumps of sugar in his coffee, and he heard a voice from behind him say, "I wouldn't have that in my house, let alone my body." And turns around, it's Gloria. He knew the voice. He turned around, it's Gloria Swanson, right? Huh. So they promoted that book pretty heavily in the late 70s and early 80s. And it just stuck. I don't know. It just stuck, Plus, I had rosacea, adult acne, and the only thing I wanted to not have was that big red nose that my grandfather had from drinking,
Right.
And sugar was treating me like, drugs and alcohol did. It was just the same, I was hungover, like lethargic and always had to have it, caffeine too. But anyway, I just quit. It took 3 years because everybody thought I was crazy. The people in the, recovery programs are like, "Mike, you sober today?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's forget about the sugar." And so anyway, after that, it took me 3 years, about 3 years. It took 3 years to quit caffeine, 3 years to quit sugar, and a year each. It took 3 total years because no one was listening to me. But anyway, fast forward, I get married, and somehow I talked my ex-wife into raising these kids with no sugar in the womb and until they were 6 years old.
Wow.
Yes.
And so I had a regular life, regular job. I was kind of a business guy, real estate, software sales, all kind of different stuff over the years.
So real quick, so your wife did this even when your children were in the womb, so she had no sugar through the entire pregnancy?
Right. That's
Wow.
right.
That's very impressive. That's when girls
Yeah.
really tend to have their cravings. That's awesome.
Yeah, that first 1,000 days, I believe, and they even have huge nonprofits now. One of them's called, I think, First 1,000 Days. But that first 1,000 days from inception to whatever 2 or 3 years is so important in brain development. And if I were to tell you the story of my kids, it would blow your. I'm actually going to see him today, my grandson. It's like it would blow your mind. Like their brain just developed better. They, coming from my family and her family. I've never seen them intoxicated. It's like they just are not drawn to substances to change their state. Okay.
Yep.
And so anyway, they obviously had a very strange childhood, right? We fought the grandparents. We fought the schools, the Montessori schools, the friends, friends' parents. They literally thought that we were depriving them of a childhood, right?
Right. Yes.
Because we weren't giving them sugar.
Yes.
And so they told me I should write a book. So I was kind of semi-retired, and I did in 2018. I opened Sugar Addiction in 2009, but I didn't really do much with it. I gave good information, but information, as we'll see hopefully in this conversation, is not enough. It's just not enough. Okay. People, you can get all this stuff that, all the quote unquote information I'm going to deliver, on Google. And people come to me with insane amounts of information, but information is not enough to change. Right. There's an old book, it's got to be 25 years old, called Change or Die. And in it, they say fear is not enough and information is not enough. It's just not how transformational changes happen, right? Especially in addiction recovery. But anyway, so when I was in 2018, I started coaching online when the book came out. And it was kind of a serendipitous luck, whatever you want to call it. But when the pandemic hit, I was fairly well geared up with an online community and coaches, and I was coaching, and it just exploded.
Yeah, I could imagine.
People were like, you've seen the pictures of the grocery stores where there's no sugar or no flour in the grocery store for months. Like the chain was interrupted because people were just buying it all up and baking and whatever at home. And then, they were buying other stuff too. But, and so they didn't want to come out of the other side of a pandemic, 30 pounds heavy or whatever.
Right.
So they started contacting us, and we've grown since then to, I started doing the summits about 7 years ago, and, all the world's experts. And strangely, for me personally, I completely changed my diet from veganism and vegetarianism and raw foodism to, animal-based products, and eventually, toyed with carnivore and everything else.
Yep.
So I learned from the experts over a 7-year, 8-year period now. And, the summits have been transformational for me personally and for, the folks that and I've watched the science develop in what the keto carnivore folks and a lot of people call citizen scientists develop. And I've really just been fascinated with the whole evolution, the rapid evolution of the sugar recovery, sugar, ultra processed, low carbohydrate world. Develop continuous glucose monitors. I mean, everything that includes. So here we are, I'm just the sugar-free man now. I guess it's stuck. Somebody started calling me that. I don't even know who, but it kind of stuck. So
I like it.
So I was wondering, and we've been asked this question, how would somebody know if they're a sugar addict versus just they have a lot of sugar cravings?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So we have a quiz on sugaraddiction.com, but I always tell them, if you take the time to go to a site called sugaraddiction.com. You don't need to take the quiz. Okay? You just like you've already made your decision.
Yeah.
Right.
My answer to this question is always, you already know. Like,
Mhm.
when people call me about coaching, 20% of them are crying. Okay. Genuinely, like at least 20%. I'm trying to be conservative here. So 20% of them are crying because they've never told anybody the stories that they're about to tell me.
Mhm.
Right. Somehow my persona is approachability. I don't know.
That's right.
I'll take it. I'll take it. You know. And so they start opening up to me because they feel like they have to, because they're at their wits' end. The book's named Last Resort Sugar Detox is because they've tried everything else, right?
Mhm.
They've tried dieting, they've tried everything, eating less. They've tried everything that's ever been written. Our
Right.
average person, I think, has tried 10 different diets, 7 different diets, something like that. Anyway, so I'm, this identifying yourself as a sugar addict is pretty easy. I mean, if it's, I could go through, chapter and verse, what addiction is in the DSM or whatever,
Mhm.
tolerance and inability to stop when you make a decision and blah, 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 and consequences like weight and health. The most stories that I get are people hiding stuff, hiding wrappers from their family.
Right.
They eat it on the way home and throw the wrappers away or whatever.
Mhm.
But the one that they think that I've never heard, but I've heard 100 times, is like they've thrown the cake in the garbage, they poured dishwashing liquid over it, and then they've cut the dishwasher an hour later, cut the dishwashing liquid
Yep.
off it and ate the rest of the cake. And they're
Yep.
like, they think that no human being could have ever done this, right?
Right. Exactly.
So,
They'd be amazed how many people do that
they
stuff.
would be amazed. So,
Yeah.
and how many people are, just so biochemically, they're, once they're eating sugar, they've set themselves up for cravings for more.
Mhm.
And
Right.
another thing too is like, it's a good indication. Strangely enough, like the majority of our clients, and I've even done a kids summit to get this down to childbearing age women.
Mhm.
Our clients are, I like to say 40 to 80, but really they're 50 to 80, almost
Mhm.
menopausal women or menopausal women to 80 years old, because I believe that they have tried so many different things, body image stuff and diet stuff, that they've narrowed it down to sugar. They've narrowed it down to their Achilles heel, the reason they can't stick to any diet. And all diets say this, right? They're all
Right.
written with quit the white stuff.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
So, yeah, I
Or
mean,
scientific papers. I mean, almost every scientific paper you read on anything, whether it's diabetes or blood pressure or anything, they almost all start off with, now, of course, this goes along with, well, proper nutrition.
yes,
Exercise is a whole nother thing. But I mean,
right.
proper nutrition is everything. But most of the studies, since it's come from drug companies who want to sell you a product, they just kind of brush over it and say, now here's how our drug can help you. It drives me crazy.
Oh, you don't even know. We are on the same page, Steve. You know, you can't. What's Lustig say? One of my mentors there, Robert Lustig,
Yep.
the big sugar guy. He's like, you can't food this problem, or you can't drug this problem. You can't drug this recovery. You have to food it, or
Yep.
something.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I've heard people talk about having an addictive behavior. Are there people that are more addictive? We had a close friend that was an alcoholic and then quit. Like he quit and would quit for a few years and then go back to drinking. But finally, when he did quit, um, he was all about the sugar. I mean, that's all he ate.
Like literally, he
Like
would go to
all
the grocery store and walk out of it with a cart full of nothing but donuts, cookies,
cakes,
cakes.
whatever
I
is in
mean,
that section. He
Right.
probably gained 300 pounds.
oh, easily. Oh, he
Yeah.
looked
So
horrible.
so
I've got a
you
picture of him in the hospital bed.
Yeah, it
He
was bad.
looked horrible, and
So
it happened pretty quick.
so do you
Quick.
think more people are addictive? Like have those
You
behaviors?
you guys are setting me up perfectly. This is
Okay,
So
good.
look, like I have, because of my story, and pretty honest. I'm a big believer in this recovery out loud movement.
Mhm.
It began with anonymity, but I'm like, screw anonymity. Like, this is like
Right.
health problem. It's not a moral issue.
Right.
Mhm.
And so, people are from recovery backgrounds are attracted to the program, and they, you know, yes, the answer to your question is yes, people do substitute addiction, but I think of it this way. They didn't go to sugar, they went back to sugar.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
They
Right.
went back to their original drug of choice when they were kids. And this is the entirety of the message that we will deliver. They started, we all start pretty much probably in the womb, but
Yeah.
definitely by the time you're 2 or 3.
Or now with infant formulas are full of this stuff. Some of these infant formulas have up to 55% high fructose corn syrup in it. So we're starting our babies off as soon as they come out of the womb, like you said, before they come out of the womb, but even after.
Right.
That's what people are trying to tell everybody. Oh, this is good, nutritious food for your baby. Don't give them breast milk. It's like crazy. Anyway, go ahead.
Correct. No, you're exactly right. Look, the problem is that what happens, and your parents might have been complicit in this, is that when they're busy, they got other kids, a job, whatever.
Mhm.
And so you're upset. Just imagine this, that you're upset and, they don't have time to get down on your level, give you a hug, ask what's wrong. So they give you a cookie and send you towards the TV.
Mhm.
And this little brain, which is overwhelmed by the sizes of the amount of sugar that they're eating when they're little in general. But we start to equate, everybody starts to equate this mild relief, this mild feeling of numbing that hurt or fear or worry or pain down a little bit. And then it just continues. I mean, when was the last time you saw a movie where the girl broke up with the guy and they didn't have an ice cream party, right? It's really, it's
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
it's become a cultural phenomenon.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Like that, like sugar. I mean, they call it comfort food for a reason, right?
Mhm.
Because it has the power to numb down feelings a little bit. It's a very common construct in the world of alcohol and drugs that if you started using alcohol and drugs at 14 or 15, you stop growing emotionally. Your life's upside down, your career, your finances, your relationships, everything's messed up because you never solved life's problems on their own. You got to the next day and it got to be 4 o'clock and the problem was still there and you just numbed out. And this
Right.
went on for decades. Well, think about that, not at 14 or 15, we had some maturity, but all the way back to 2 or 3, this ingrained deep limbic understanding that if you ingest this sugar, now this is not a conscious thing. This
Right.
is the thing like Friday afternoon, you need a beer, you know what you're doing, you want to numb out a little bit, just forget about that stupid work stuff. That's not the same. This is so available, so free, so ubiquitous,
Mhm.
so available that a child can get at any time, is that it becomes just an unconscious, I feel like a chocolate bar, I feel like a Coke. I feel, it's this feeling of craving something you're not, and I want to stress this so hard, you're not craving a sweet taste on your tongue. You're craving a dopamine hit. And when I say dopamine, just so everyone knows, I mean dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, oxytocin, adrenal glands, endorphins, cannabinoid receptors. Every brain and body reward system is affected by sugar. People just know what dopamine is now, right? And
Yeah.
so use that
I think they do.
as a coverall to all of the brain and body reward chemicals. So you're just looking for this dopamine push. Like if the brain's not all that smart, at least the limbic system
Right.
is not that smart. The deep brain, and if you've trained it to override 10 million years of evolution that to create to chase food and sex to procreate the species, and you can just sit on the couch and get that relief, that feeling, that that vital reward, you're not going to go to the exercise, you're not going to go to the whole food, what I
Right.
mean?
Mhm.
And what makes it even harder, just like you said with kids, the parents want to set the kids down in front of the television and give them some sugar to eat on, make them feel better. And now you've got the drug companies who are out there spending 75% of all commercial on television are funded by the drug companies. And of the other 25%, 15 is from the food companies. So they're sitting there feeding these people saying, no, this is good. You can have all the sugar you want. Don't worry if you get sick. We got medication, take care of that. And they don't realize that this is all going subliminally, and they don't know. They just know, oh, everybody's doing this, must be good. Right. I think that's what makes it really hard. It's not like everybody's sitting around doing heroin and everything around you.
I agree 110%. And I want to emphasize that I've heard recently, and from Callie and Casey Means there, that they're not buying all the airtime for the newscast, over 50% of it, to sell it to the public. They're doing it so they don't have any bad stories, because there's basically funding news. Right. And that's the crazy part, is they're doing it because news, especially network news, is running out of money because they don't have any other sponsors. So they're doing it so that no bad stories are printed or run about their drugs.
Right.
That's the crazy part.
It is crazy.
All of it is. So if somebody was going to start, how do you assess whether this person is a cold turkey, you just got to do it, or do you wean off, or do you say no, sugar is everywhere, you can't wean off, you need to do cold turkey? Do you have a view one way or the other?
Yeah, no, that's the look, no matter how much you wean, you're going to have withdrawal symptoms. Like it doesn't really, and they're pretty similar, especially, and I learned this obviously from people who've done it 10 or 15 times,
Right.
People say, what's your business model, Mike? I say, I sort for people who are ready. Like if they're not ready, nothing I can do.
Yeah.
Really. They've got to be ready.
I love that.
Yeah.
Interventions rarely work. And people really aren't sensitive to interventions in the sugar world yet, they call it body shaming or whatever. But anyway, regardless, the answer to your question is that you're going to have to quit cold turkey. Abstinence is my job, as I see it, is to show someone 100% abstinence from flour, sugar, and caffeine for the first time in their life. Okay. So that I don't need after that to make any more. Like I'm done. I mean, yes, there's longer term groups that we have that, want to improve their health and longevity and stuff. But for the most part, if I can get them to 90 days of 100% abstinence, which doesn't seem irrational to me. People go vegetarian, people quit whatever. They change what they're eating. They do all kinds of whatever, Ayurvedic. They do all kind of other stuff. But when they begin to attempt this process, which it sounds simple, all these things are legal, it's just not easy. Okay.
Right.
There is withdrawals. Okay. And they're, depending on your habit, it's very it can, there's a spectrum, right? Now at this juncture, after 70 some odd thousand detoxes, that, I can almost tell pattern recognition day to day where somebody's going to be from where they start. Like weight, although this is not going to be a discussion about weight is a nice signal to me how, if I take an intake and I can see how heavy they were as children. People who are very heavy at 3, 4, 5, and 6 that early are it's much more difficult than people who were thin and they had, some muscle memory of good food, and for the most part before they got way into it. Right. But pretty much over the first 30 days, I can almost tell day to day where they're going to be and what the symptoms are going to be: lethargy, headaches, irritability, actual depression, right? So finally, your body says, you stop getting sugar, and the scientific term, and again, this is for all of the brain and body reward chemicals. the dopamine receptors are down regulated. They're thinned out. You have less of them. And so it takes time not to regenerate, because there's not a lot of proof that they actually regenerate, but there is proof that you can build new ones.
Mhm.
So that neural pathway has to be cemented over, blocked over, closed down, and you have to build a new neural pathway of self-soothing.
Mhm.
People, I got a tick that I say, write this down, that, self-soothing, right? They need to change the way that they've self-soothed, right? And this change starts to happen like at day 10 or 15. It's incorporated into our detox simply because the common refrain is, Mike, about day 10, I'm losing my mind,
Mhm.
because they've kicked out the crutch. They've pulled away the crutch, and they don't have this way to self-soothe. So they've got to go for a walk or a run or go to yoga or get a hug or get a manicure or a pedicure or a massage. They've
Mhm.
got to change the way they've self-soothed. And this presents pretty quickly, right? It presents to the point where you've heard this, like the statistics, right? So 95% of all people who lose any amount of weight gain it all back in the first year and then add some, like
Yep.
they put more on. This is super easy to explain, because
Mhm.
when you start, say, everybody starts at the first of the year. They start, life's okay. Kids are okay. Relationships are okay. Everything's going on, work's good. Money's good. So, they lose 20, 30 pounds, and they're 30, 60, 90 days in, and something goes a little awry. Somebody dies, whatever, something happens. Okay. And they don't think to themselves, well, I need to use sugar to go back
Right.
to
Yeah.
feel better because my mom just died or whatever.
Mhm.
That's not how it works. They just, let me just have a little candy bar. And then they're back to the races. They're back to, using sugar regularly. And it ramps up very quickly, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Easy to explain. If you take, I always say the difference between the brain and the body, guys, or the addiction and emotions, and brain stuff and the body stuff. Okay. If you take away the body stuff, meaning everybody for 50, 100 years has studied the body, the weight, the diabetes, but no one has focused in this arena, sugar and addiction, and in the brain and emotions, like what happens in your brain. This,
Right.
at the end of the day, is a brain issue. This is a brain disease. Okay.
Mhm.
And now people are beginning to believe and understand, and the science is advanced to the point that it's almost proven.
Mhm.
This is what's going on with people who are attempting to restrict, which they all do, all the diets say, restrict carbohydrates. There's a change, emotional and mental change in their person, and they've got to understand that's what's happening. They can't just eat different food and exercise more.
Right.
It works simply because it looks like it works only 5% of the time. 95% of the time it doesn't work long term, because in our program and in general, people are using the exercise as their self-soothing. Okay. So they get a little bit of ways into it. They've done some restriction, not the way I do it at the, like 100% for a little bit. They've got a little bit into it, and they've used the exercise for the self-soothing to help rebuild the dopamine. Right. And
Right.
so, but unless they understand what they actually did, they can't make it long term. They
Mhm.
can't make it that first year. They can't stick to it, right?
Mhm.
So I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there, but
No, that's all good.
yeah.
And it's also important for people to realize that, and I actually did 2 back-to-back podcasts on your carbohydrate addiction is by design. I mean, they need to realize that these commercials and this food, it
Oh,
is made for you to be addicted. I mean, that they just like the whole, Philip Morris and who's the other one?
I remember.
I don't even remember.
Or
R.J.
the-
Reynolds.
RJ
Yes.
Reynolds. Yeah, RJ Reynolds and Philip Morris, and coming over here. And it was by design. You are addicted for a reason. So don't feel bad about yourself for being addicted. You are by far not alone. I mean, most people are, but it is by design. So if you know who's designing it, then you can hopefully keep from watching that stuff. Quit watching the commercials. Quit buying the stuff.
Oh yeah,
That's where you come in, though,
I
because
think the story needs to be told more that in the 80s, the food companies' largest purchases in the business world at that time bought up all the food companies,
Mhm.
General
Yep.
Mills and Procter & Gamble and everything.
after
And
their cigarette sales started dropping,
yeah,
after they got everybody addicted to cigarettes.
they started, and you read books like Michael Moss's Hooked or whatever, where they literally are sliding you into MRIs and testing the stuff on your tongue to see how your brain lights up. I
Right.
mean, it's scary. It's
Yeah.
scary that
Yeah.
this exists and happens in our world. Food scientists are not trying to, yes, they're trying to get to the bliss point of taste,
Right.
but they're also looking at what we discussed earlier, what's going on in the brain of the person who's ingesting it.
Right.
And that's scary. I mean, especially for kids. That hurts my heart. That's
Mhm.
scary.
Oh yeah.
It's awful. We have a great nephew that's 8 maybe, and he's so overweight, and you just hate to see that. I mean, like, his mom takes him to the gas station to get some gas station food, the I don't know if it's a Red Bull, but the drinks and the
Yeah.
chips.
So 8 years old, whatever, 120 pounds, something like that, or more than
yeah.
that. I mean,
But it's just so sad. I mean, like you were saying, when they're that little, he'll just struggle with this unless he really, really wants to change. He'll just struggle with this the rest of his life.
He will. And
Uh-huh.
that's scary. That hurts your heart. Yeah.
Right.
Kids don't want to be mean. I mean, it's just they are at that age.
Mhm.
They follow their peers and the names and you grow up in almost a different world when you grow up in a body of that size.
Mhm.
oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I just think the part where you raised your kids sugar free is just fascinating. So, like, how did you keep them away? Was it at 6 because they were now kind of in school and then they can just kind of make their own choices, or did you feel like
Or
the
have
brain?
friends.
Yeah. So, and I think this should happen regularly. And I don't think of it as that huge of an accomplishment. There's two divisions, and this is don't start them, and if they've started.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Like, kids don't buy anything.
Exactly.
They don't go to school till 4 or 5.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
4 or 5, it was no big deal. Except, like I said, if they were they actually went to daycare a little bit, and I never let them stay at their grandparents, because I knew my father would do it to spite me. You know what I mean? Just think it, ha ha ha. So, that's easy. And I think people should realize, if a woman finds out she's pregnant, she will quit smoking cigarettes, not like in a couple days,
No.
that afternoon.
Mhm.
Walk out, throw them in the garbage. That'll be it. She'll be done.
Mhm.
It's an amazing phenomenon. Substance use disorder, sugar, well, yeah, sugar too, but alcohol, drugs, she'll quit that day. Okay.
Mhm.
But sugar, like, it's almost a free pass.
Mhm.
You
Right.
can have an ice cream sundae with pickles on it because you got a craving. That,
Mhm.
I think, is the sickest kind of myth about pregnancy, that you have these strange tastes. They
Yep.
just, my ex is a good example. She had a child before we were married, and she gained 60 pounds on that pregnancy. Okay. And when she had the boy, they were twins. There was 14 pounds of baby in there, and she only gained 20 pounds. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not a thing, it's not a thing where you're able to do that. And so, back to the first 4 or 5 years, there's no reason to do it. The reason, what happened with the with the at 6, is we were at another birthday party. When you're in kindergarten, you go to a lot of birthday parties.
Yeah.
And we're at another birthday party. It's a roller skating rink, and the noise is loud as hell. And ice cream comes out, and both of them are like, "Can we, Dad, this time?" And we just gave in. We were done fighting, and we
Yeah.
let them have it. So, but we regained our resolve. The next, whatever, like they only had it at those outside birthday parties,
Mhm.
Right.
never at home. And it's an interesting story. My mother used to say that you're a perfect angel, Michael. And I'm like, Mom, everybody says. She said, no, no, no. When you would fall asleep, you would get a halo around on your pillow, and your hair would be wet, and you'd have this halo on your pillow. And I'm like, it was like it was sweat, right?
Mhm.
Uh, and I had never seen this in my kids. Like this had never happened. I'll
Mhm.
watch them sleep sometimes, just spend half an hour watching them sleep. Never seen this like ever. Well, guess what happened that night at 6 years old?
Oh,
They had the halo.
Yep.
They had the wet hair. They had the wet shirt
Yep.
because they were in sugar withdrawals.
Oh, yeah.
You
wow.
know? And so that was pretty much that cemented me in. That was like really scary
Mhm.
because one of the withdrawal symptoms is night sweats.
Mhm.
One of the
Right.
withdrawal symptoms. So the second part of it is if they've already started and they're under 9, approximately 9, they will change with you if you do it. There's no zero, uh,
Right.
do what I do and don't do what I say, whatever that is.
Right.
Yep.
Hey, do whatever that saying is.
Yeah.
That doesn't work in this game.
Uh-huh.
And even on the other side of that, we've talked to so many people that they want to get healthy. They realize this is bad. They want to get healthy, but I don't want to deprive my child of this sweetness.
I
It's
hear
like,
this all the
what are you saying?
I can't
How much toxin do you have to give them before it's bad?
I hear this all the time. You should, it's one of the, helping hand, like the how to quit is to clear the house out, because
Yes.
Right.
in
Yes.
the house, you're going to eat it. You're going to be tempted. And so, folks they don't want to do it. The exact reason you just said, like that, I can't, deprive my kids, whatever. So at 9 years old, after 9, it gets harder. But before 9, I've had a lot of experience. Couple of my coaches have, got their kids involved, and the kids talk very openly about it, like my kids did. They don't have any problem talking about, no, we don't have sugar, whatever.
Mhm.
And it's not a big deal to them. Before they ever have it, they don't know what it is. Like they don't
Right.
ever see ever see in a grocery store where the kid's trying to get to the candy, like he's sitting in the seat, he's literally almost tipping over. Well, my kids used to play blocks. They were colored. They didn't know what that stuff was. So,
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
they don't know what it is. And so that's easy. But, between even if they've already had it when they were younger, if they're under 9, they'll want to do what you do, right? They'll just
Mhm.
want to do what you do. And then after 9 or 10, it's the die is cast a little bit,
Mhm.
and they're always going to want it. They're going to be able to access it at school. They're going to be able to trade lunches. They're going to be able to get it. Okay. And they've kind of been hooked at that point. So you've got to be a little bit more forceful.
Mhm.
So it's harder, but it's a challenge. And again, I've done a kids summit. It was the only summit where every speaker thanked me.
Mhm.
I was thanking them, and they're thanking me because they know how important it is and was.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And so if you are going to start weaning somebody off sugar, get them off their, not wean them, get somebody off sugar addiction. You already said number one, you've got to clean it out of your house. Get it totally out of the house.
Yeah.
What are the next 2, 3 things? Is there a common thing, or is that's where people kind of diverge as far as how their brain works on it, the treatment?
No, I like this because people need the nuts and bolts of what exactly to do. Yes, you got to clean out the house, and a lot of people don't understand the connection of the flour and the caffeine. Okay,
Mhm.
and so there is a requirement at the beginning, at least, to get to your 90 days or 6 months so that you can test your body on this stuff without sugar. Most people don't want to go back. Like their skin's better. They're thinner. The most we do surveys. I'm talking people who have lost 100 pounds and put type 2 in remission.
Mhm.
They they don't talk about that. They talk about their brain coming back online, that they're focused better, they remember better, their anxiety's less, their depression's less. So people are not like, it's not all about the weight. But what I was saying is the flour and the sugar, flour turns to stomach in your, it turns to sugar in your stomach and keeps the cravings alive. It's a saying I use a lot. It keeps the cravings alive. Heavy fruit use, fruit juice, dried fruit, tropical fruit with heavy fructose, hybridized.
Right.
So it has a lot of fructose. Nuts hybridized, so they have a lot of fructose. Once you start to heal up from the sugar, the drupes, they're called. You can Google this, gang. DRUPES. They're not. It's not nuts. Almonds aren't nuts. Cashews aren't nuts. Pecans aren't nuts. They're drupes. They're the seeds of fruit, and they've been hybridized to take the bitterness out of it. One of the things I like to stress with people, and I'm glad this, we don't have a time limit. There's a lot to this arc of the podcast to understand like all of the parts of it so you can make regular good decisions, is that, people, when they begin to heal from sugar, the fructose starts to bother them. The fructose molecule is the problem, okay? That for the folks on the audience that don't know, the table sugar molecule is half fructose and half glucose. And the fructose is the problem. And I believe, and I've asked Lustig and Taubes and a lot of these guys directly, is fructose a psychoactive drug? Richard Johnson, who wrote the book Nature Wants to Be Fat, has a grant from the government, from the National Institutes of Health, that he believes that if he can block the fructose pathway, he can cure alcoholism. And so I want to stress that flour, heavy amounts of fruit are just going to keep the cravings alive. And who in God's name wants to do this if you're going to be craving all the time?
Right.
That's
the people making money off of it.
Do you put almond flour? Coconut flour, almond, all that just
in my, I can't get any food testing companies to take my business because they would lose all their other business were I to use their name, right? But I theorize that almond flour has more fructose in it than almost as much as sugar. But flour in general, anything, I call it powder addiction. Anything that's been reduced to a white powder, the body just isn't experienced. And I include supplements in a lot of this too. I'll get into this supplement thing. And remember to ask me that question about the supplement, what I call supplement use disorder. But it's like you would like it as an
pharmacist.
There you go. This powder prescription, if you will.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm getting a little off track here, but the bottom line is that flour is a big problem in the house. So you got to get the flour out. Now, caffeine, people are like, wow, no, don't take this away from me. But I discovered this 7 years ago. I was working with an Olympic athlete, not like a bronze medalist in swimming. And this time she's a chiropractor, got a couple of kids, and she could not quit sugar. I started working with her for free because I'd love to have a testimonial from an Olympic.
Yeah.
So we couldn't get her to stop. She just kept calling month after month. She'd be like, I try, and she'd have an excuse. Now this is a woman. She's already a doctor, a chiropractor. She's won an Olympic medal. She was still swimming. It wasn't a weight thing, but she couldn't quit the sugar and she couldn't watch her kids go down this rabbit hole. So we start digging. We're always talking. And I'm going to find out the coaches were giving her coffee at 10 years of age and for performance in the pool.
Oh,
and no child is drinking that stuff without, some sugar. And so in her brain, wired together, like chocolate and tea and coffee, wired together is got caffeine. Where's the sugar? It's like brain is signaling and keeping the cravings alive, wired together, fired together, right?
Yep.
And so it's been a, we added to the I've revamped the sugar challenge 4 times because I keep learning stuff like this. The supplement use disorder thing is, we found out this is what happened. Folks would lose, they got like 50 pounds to lose, they lose 20 or 30, and they stalled for months. They're perfect, no flour, no sugar, no caffeine. They're doing great. Well, all of a sudden, we go into this audit mode and we start digging again. We start trying to find out. Come to find out, they're ingesting upwards of 30. Well, that was the highest one, 30, 20, 25, 30 different supplements that they had just sourced over the internet that they thought were good. And again, my theory is that the liver never got a break. It just, it healed up enough from the sugar and flour and caffeine reduction and loss in the system, but they never got to the point where that the liver was finally healing and the fatty liver was healing and all that kind of stuff, because we're still processing all this powder every day and these capsules every day. So we got them to cut back or completely eliminate it, and the weight loss started again. So, and this has happened now 20 or 30 times, so I might have to revamp the thing again. I'm writing a little booklet on supplement use disorder, but it's just, it's been a discovery over the years of pattern recognition of just so many people coming to us wanting to quit, but not knowing what to do, or what we talked about earlier, the relationship with their brain reward chemicals. So.
Right.
That's really interesting.
Which also goes into, I know with addictions, there's usually a trigger. There's something that's going on. So as soon somebody can say, oh yeah, I understand all this, but then now you have a trigger that you don't realize that is a trigger, and all of a sudden you start eating it. What are I know that's a big reason why we don't want anybody to have anything in their house, because obviously there's going to be triggers everywhere. Opening up a cabinet could be a trigger if you see it as like, oh, that's right. Oh, you're not going to say, oh, this is for my kids, I better not eat that. Just get it out of the house. But what are some main big triggers that you guys have had to deal with?
I honest to God, gang, I didn't set these guys up with any questions at all. They are setting me up perfectly. Triggers are real. Okay. Triggers are real. And there's all kinds of them. I try and tell people to stay out of the middle of the grocery store.
Yes.
I mean, you can smell the candy aisle. I mean, it's just like there's an odor, like whatever. You can smell the sugar. And it's just too tempting. 85% of the food products in the grocery store have sugar in them
on purpose.
On purpose, for obvious reasons, because people re-ingest them because that made them feel good that evening when they ate it on that sauce or whatever. That salad.
Cha-ching. Yeah.
So they get an imperceptible or almost imperceptible. Now, remember, when you're an adult, you're not really getting a buzz like a kid when the birthday cake comes out and all hell breaks loose, right? You're just getting back to even. You're just not starting withdrawals. You just don't want to, feel bad, and so, but there's all kinds of triggers, obviously the holidays, obviously birthdays, any kind, everything from birth to death is covered completely with, some kind of sugar. And this is a cultural perfect storm. And that cultural perfect storm has been created by, since slavery, this growth in the availability, the marketplace availability and inexpensive nature of sugar. The price kept dropping. It was very expensive 300 years ago, and only kings and nobles had it.
Right.
And they would hand it out like cocaine in little tiny spoons, and now everyone can have it. And it's just a problem with the ability. And then we didn't know the science, like the cigarettes, right? We didn't know what was going on in the body, and now we can't do that. We cannot turn our, whatever that is, we can't die anymore.
Right.
So, and the triggers, I would say a trigger is as individual as a fingerprint in a lot of ways. Like
Mhm.
everybody has their own specific, special way that they ingest, thing that they ingest, reason, timing,
Mhm.
sometimes an ex-husband, sometimes,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, whatever.
Well, and you go back, I think you said this at the beginning with your mom, and it's like it's love. And you think of when these holidays or birthdays, and it's like, but I made your favorite cake, or this, and even back with grandparents that want to give their grandkids, but I'm the grandma. I'm supposed to give my kids sugar, you know.
Yeah, no, you're getting into what is the heart of the long-term program, okay? And the heart of the long-term program, and I, used to sugarcoat this. Actually, I do in the challenge about day 28 or 29. I say,
Sugarcoat it.
yeah, I think to think of a better analogy, but or a better phrase. But anyway, about the day 28 or 29, I say, ha, I tricked you. This is not a weight loss or diet program. This is an addiction recovery program. And the things that Theresa was talking about are, in essence, codependency. Okay. And people don't want to make that jump in the early days. They've got to get a month of abstinence before they start to, track with what I'm talking about, where the hard part about one of the hardest parts about, and we'll get into how we fix this in a second, about change in this way is the conversations that you continue to have. You have to continue to have. You have to say no a lot. You have to,
Mhm.
they baked it for me, as you said, Teresa.
Right.
Right.
And so you just don't want to have this discussion again. Like, and you don't, most of our folks, as I mentioned, are women, and they grew up pleasing their spouse, their parents, their boss, and they're people pleasers in general. And saying no is very difficult to them.
Mhm.
And, and this is pretty common across the guys in our program, which there are not that many. And I don't understand that. I'm trying to figure that one out, but we'll get there. But
Mhm.
anyway,
Probably ego, I would think. They don't want to admit that they actually have an addiction problem. Maybe.
yeah, I mean, one of the things is the sugar is the good girl's drug. Okay.
Mhm.
The guys are drinking and the women are, and it's not sexist in any way. It's just
Mhm.
real.
Yeah.
And these are things that I've learned from my coaches and people who have, years of success, right? I have this advanced group that I facilitate myself personally, where people have 2 months to 3 and 4 years, where we're working on these types of codependency issues. I'll tell you a story. So this woman, she was about 5.5 months, no sugar, no flour, no caffeine, doing great, lost 20 pounds, doing great. And one of her friends' husbands died. So after a grieving period, they went out to lunch, and they had their nice lunch. She did good. She didn't have anything bad. It came around and they weren't talking about her much. They were talking about her ex-husband, her husband's friend, or her friend's husband. And so come around dessert time, the woman wanted to split a pie with her, and she just couldn't say no. She just
Mhm.
couldn't. Like, she was a good friend, and this was a relationship she'd had for decades. She couldn't say no. And she regained she got back on track the next day, but it's just it comes to, it proves to you this ingrained desire to be member of a tribe. Okay. If you
Mhm.
left a tribe 1,000 years ago, you could die. If you were ostracized from a tribe, you could die.
Mhm.
So the sugar cult, if you will, basically now the entirety of society around the world has been ingrained because of what I just discussed, the marketplace and the the sweet taste and the not knowing scientifically what it's actually doing. And that, in
Mhm.
my opinion, I I interviewed Elaine Lelaine. You know who this is?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So Elaine Lelaine, Jack Lalaine's wife,
Uh-huh.
98. She's about to give me 10 push-ups. And I said, no, Elaine, don't get down and give me. Anyway, she said Jack had a line. He said, Jack blames sugar for everything.
Mhm.
And I've gotten to the point, one of the old grand dames in this, she passed away. What was her name? Nancy Appleton. She's the first one to create a list of 140 maladies that sugar it contributes to
Oh yeah.
is. And so I believe in Jack's phrase, after doing this for so long, because I have had so many remissions of lupus, chronic, or what is it? Rheumatoid arthritis is just a paper tiger. Everybody's hands and knees stop hurting when they start, when they stop sugar. Everybody.
Yes.
It's amazing. One woman had a one knee operation, had the other one scheduled. I said, give me 90 days. And she still to this day, 2.5 years later, has not had that second operation.
That's awesome.
Like all of everything, lupus, thyroid, all of this stuff goes. Pregnancy. I got a couple women pregnant. I wasn't even there.
Yeah, skin conditions, ton of skin conditions, psoriasis and everything.
Psoriasis, skin is one of the big ones. If I could, like, people wouldn't need these beauty products if they understood that the aging comes from the inside,
Exactly.
and from the sugar. It's called, if you want the science, I got the science, as Lustig would say, glycation, browning of your skin. It happens on the outside, but it's also happening on the inside, right?
And that's when glucose attaches to protein, which is the problem with all of this. And that's what's bad. People think they have diabetes. They think that's like, I have blood pressure, high blood pressure. It's like, no, if you have diabetes, that means that's an umbrella. It means you're setting yourself up for organ damage all over the place, including Alzheimer's, skin diseases, heart attack, renal failure, everything.
They called the disease sugar. I remember distinctly. I was about 12, 15 years old. Yeah. My buddy said, I have sugar. I said, what the hell is that?
Sugar diabetes. I know. Yeah.
They used to call that was the name of the disease, or the slang or whatever.
Yep.
But and now they try to distance themselves from that. I heard a great story about the creation of the disease or the malady pre-diabetes. So apparently the drug producers sat in a room, and I got to get this guy on because he was good. He was actually at that Austin event.
We saw that, and I came home and immediately did a podcast on it. It's like, you guys will not believe where pre-diabetes came from.
Yeah, tell them the story because it's amazing.
Well, no, you go ahead. Finish
it. Well, basically they sat in a room trying to figure out and it's basically on your way to diabetes. Your A1C is a little higher, but they needed a catch-all term, and they came up a marketing term of pre-diabetes.
Right, because they want to get more people on diabetic medications,
Correct.
Which all diabetic medications work by increasing insulin or increasing insulin sensitivity, which makes diabetes worse. So now they've got a new subset of people that aren't diabetic yet, according to their A1C levels, which that was a whole nother story of how they keep lowering the A1C levels because of selling drugs. Has nothing to do with health.
Right.
But now that's what they've done is they said, how can we do this? So now they can start people on diabetic medication sooner, which makes their diabetes worse. So now they can start adding more and more drugs and more higher doses. And it's criminal.
Have you read recently the information, the studies that are coming out that right around menopause increases insulin sensitivity? And so now it's starting to compute with me as to why a lot of my clients are approaching us at near menopause, because now it seems harder for them, or it seems to hit them harder when they ingest sugar, harder hangovers, harder. Like the next day you're a little foggy and, a little blue.
Yeah. Not as motivated.
I'm glad we're taking some time here because you're triggering things that I would love to get out, but I just never have time. I believe that sugar, I don't believe anymore. I know in my heart, in my soul, that sugar is an amotivational drug. And you don't hear much about this anymore. It was pretty popular 10 or 15 years ago around marijuana, that it was an amotivational drug that made you feel like less. But it makes sense because it's affecting the mitochondria. It's affecting the cell's energy furnace, the where the energy is produced. And so, what's the hardest part about going to the gym is going to the gym. Like, people think that, they feel a little more motivated when they cut the white stuff, basically because they're not, the cells aren't working to detox it. They're actually being fueled by real food,
Right.
Yeah. So it's, it just goes on and on. I mean, it's like, there's nothing that's going to change my mind anymore. Aging, in my opinion, in almost every malady you can think of, is just sugar abuse.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
It's
It is.
just like people think their joints, their aches and pains, their whatever, their diabetes, their Alzheimer's. I mean, they're
Right.
calling Alzheimer's diabetes 3, for goodness
Yeah.
sake,
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. It's
I
crazy.
know.
because the spikes are in the brain as well, the glucose spikes.
Mhm.
Right.
So yeah, it's wild.
And then this is another thing, kind of switching gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we have talked to people in the past about, if they're wanting to start becoming healthy. They really aren't that obese, but they know how bad sugar is and that it causes almost every single disease state that's out there. I mean, it really is the base of almost every one of them. But so what we tell them is, and I know where your podcast that we listen to, so I am going that way. We tell them, if you've got to do it, bake something at home. Don't get anything from the store. And the main reason we say that is because if you're going to do it, you're not going to eat as much. You're not going to eat as often if you have to do it from scratch.
Right.
But that's when you have to know, are you an addict? Are you okay and you can handle something every now? Or if you're an addict, because if you're an addict, like you guys are saying, you don't even want that in the house, because if you've got the ingredients to bake, then you've got the flour, you've got the sugar, and hopefully you don't have these horrible seed oils and you're using that instead of good healthy animal oils.
Right.
So how do you guys distinguish that? I know, 'cause we were listening to you talking with what's her name?
Joan Iflin.
Joan Iflin.
Yeah.
And you were always like, no, we tell them, don't even bake it at home. You don't want the ingredients in the house. And I totally get that.
That interview was about something Joan discovered, which I think is relevant, is the Nova scale down in the guy from South America discovered. He tried to rank, and it's actually catching on, ultra processed carbohydrates, ultra processed food in 4 different sections. And apparently his literature says that. I think he's not that he's taken it back yet, and thanks part to Joan, but that they said they could do that. But if you're an addict, you just can't.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
I think that's was just a glitch in his identification system.
Okay.
So it's not something that's and Joan got a little political heat for that.
Oh, did she?
The folks that are trying to, get it named into the DSM and to the World Health Organization, ICD-10.
Right.
She got a little heat for that.
Oh.
Which is fine. We can take the heat. Both of us would, actually.
Yeah.
What was I going to say?
We were talking about having ingredients in the house and baking at home versus just don't have it in the house at all and don't just.
Oh, what I was going to tell you is that I was the chairman of the board of the Food Addiction Institute for 2 years, and I worked with all of these folks, the Jones and the Bittens, everybody who's, who at that time period, which is 2020 or 2019 or something, had worked and tried to figure out this thing. And a lot of them, the founder, Phil, had been working in food addiction for 30 some odd years, right? And, and this is really where the summits came in, is all these people were languishing in anonymity. They had never, the public had never heard them. And that's kind of what I see myself in the ecosystem, is to try and get this message out,
Right.
With the internet stuff. But what they came up with is, actually, I think Bitten came up with it. She's a nurse from Sweden, who's probably one of the most, one of my contemporaries, is that she discovered that she called it, there's 3 categories, and this breaks down almost identical to the obesity crisis. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So a third of people are stone cold addicts. Okay. Biochemically, they cannot ingest sugar. And this is way higher than what people believe alcoholics are,
Mm-hmm.
where they think only 10% of the population is alcoholic. I think it's higher, but 10%. So she over the years, she's kind of, and everybody agreed, and it still agrees. And then about a third of people, and that's obesity, and about a third of people she calls harmful users. And harmful users are people, because 85% of the food products in the grocery store have sugar in them. They have just, I call it a push alcoholic or a push sugar addict, where they don't really have the tendency, and they, with a little bit of adjustment, can, maybe use sugar again eventually in their life, right? I'm a big fan of harm reduction in the alcohol and drug world, and harm reduction for this 2/3, the harmful users and the normies that we all hate. No, just kidding. The folks who can just have a half a cookie and never think about it for a month, they're a third of the population as well. But I do want to quantify very succinctly that you can be a very thin sugar addict. Wait, just because these match the same numbers, a third and a third and a third, doesn't mean you can't. I have a coach that's an ultra marathoner and 100 miles a week, and she still couldn't drop the extra 15 pounds until she quit sugar. And now her times are better and the whole nine, and she dropped the 15 pounds. But as you can't run this off, if nobody out in the audience is running 100 miles, like less than 1% are running 100 miles a week. So this more exercise is not going to work. So, yeah. So it's a good breakdown, and I think it's real. From my experience, it's real. Again, it's not my job to tell an obese person that their problem is sugar addiction, flour addiction, ultra processed carbohydrate addiction. It's for them to make that decision. But when someone does the test, I always say, let the information light on you. Do the experiment, do the test. Give me 90 days, all right? Give yourself 90 days, like the gift of 90 days. Just try it, okay? You've tried vegetarianism. You've tried the South Beach diet. You've tried everything. Try this.
Right. So what if somebody says, I don't know. I don't know if I'm addicted. I don't know if I have a cravings. So I'm just going to go off everything and see. What are the withdrawal symptoms that will be very likely they're going to see, so they know, oh, this is a withdrawal symptom, so I must have been addicted. What are the most common withdrawal symptoms people see when they try to go cold turkey?
Yeah, no. Now remember, like everything, it's on a spectrum.
Right. Obviously, yeah.
The main ones are lethargy, and one of the things I like to put in here and really stress with folks is depression is real. There's a term called anhedonia. I don't know if you guys know this term, but anhedonia for the folks is the inability to feel joy. And likely, if you're following our program, this is more tied to the caffeine, because we have a caffeine group, and these people are not interested in quitting sugar. They just want to get off caffeine. It's giving them problems for all, sleep and all other things, anxiety. And it can go for months before the sun comes back out, But and you do not, and again, I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on TV, on the internet. It's like you are not really depressed. Most times people are not really depressed. It's just that your body has just said, thank you for stop bludgeoning my dopamine receptors and down regulating them, and let me help heal back, And so you're going to be a little off, a little blue, a little bit, you're going to, if you're not a napper, you're going to take naps for 10 days or a month or something. And hunger, this is a big one, big one. You're just starving for a month all the time. And people think that one thing that happens is people's relationship to hunger changes. In other words, my stomach used to growl so loud you could hear it across the table. My stomach hasn't growled in 35 years.
Yeah, mine doesn't either.
Doesn't happen. It's not a thing. Hangry, right? Hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. You get all those things, right? But this relationship to food, how your body thinks of sustenance, thinks of ingesting nourishment, is not this growling, ravenous, I have to eat thing. That goes away. It's not a real thing. And I can't, if I could, some of the constructs that we've gone through in this time period, if I could like transmit them into people's brains easily without them experiencing them, this would be a lot easier message to deliver.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, they, they're going to be depressed. They're going to be starving. They're going to be lethargic. They're going to be tired. They're going to be, they're like their relationship to food or when they eat is going to change, like, because obviously their food they're going to eat is going to change.
Right.
What other good ones? There's you mentioned earlier rashes, you'll break out, but the main ones, again, I want to keep the main message. The main message is that, you're going to feel different emotionally. You might be weepy. You won't know why you're weepy because unconsciously, maybe you haven't even consciously thought about it. Our job is to raise it through journaling and talking with you. And it doesn't have to be capital T or sexual or physical trauma, but
Mhm.
some of the stuff that you tamp down with sugar, and now we know scientifically, this is where this whole BS of the emotional eating stuff came from. Okay.
Mhm.
It's not emotional eating. It's well, it is, but it's really this addiction to sugar that has allowed you to not feel those feelings. And then, like credit, you got to pay the piper eventually. And there's a ton of books out there now about this phenomena, and they're just not well known. So when you start restricting, completely eliminating, there's a different set of feelings that rise up in your body that are old stuff you never dealt with. And then now you've got today's stuff, your everyday stresses and strains that you have to change how you handle them, how you work through them. I
Right.
always tell the story. People come to me, no exaggeration, 20 years of talk therapy. Okay. They've been in therapy for 20 years, working on their childhood issues, working on this, that, and the other thing. Most times, the reason that they wanted to lose weight. Okay. And they, why do they keep not being able to, right? Well, grieving or working through a problem doesn't happen in 50 minutes. You may have a great session and you may access this stuff, but most of the folks are undoing it at the 7-Eleven on the way home. Okay.
Yep.
Undoing the work that they did. They're stopping the feelings. Where in actuality, you've got to, and I hate this, I've always hated this phrase and not going to change. You've got to lean into it a little bit for a week or a month or a year. Losing a spouse or losing a grandparent or losing someone doesn't just go away, or again, God forbid, sexual or physical abuse. That stuff, working through that, doesn't happen in a 50-minute session, especially when you've got a drug to stop the process, the feeling, working through stuff. And this is the message that most people don't want to hear. They don't feel they have time to execute. They don't think it's right, that whatever reason. But let me tell you that thousands of people that have actually listened and actually done this have got relief and really don't crave sugar anymore. They don't think about it. It's not something. And another thing, that whole can I transmit the experience into someone's brain thing is that you come to live in a process where, any of your stresses and strains, all of your old stuff. I mean, you just talked about Joan one time. We've talked about Joan Iflin, who's one of my contemporaries. So one time I'm interviewing her, right? And she had just come from um, a therapy session with her therapist. And I'm not talking out of school. She has a very strained relationship with her daughter, who's a doctor. And because she was such a bitch, her words, not mine, children, when she was younger, when she was still on sugar.
Mhm.
And so, honest to God, she just kept processing it, like with me in the interview. and like talking about it. And at the end, I was like, John, you want to redo this, or no, put it out there, because it become the process of how you deal with life changes slightly, ever so slightly, as what people will be going through in order to stay off it, because you're developing these new coping mechanisms that do not include a substance, right?
Right.
It's very common work in alcohol and drugs, but no one is willing to match it with what I believe is just as strong a substance. The dose makes the poison, right? You
Right.
take a little heroin, you take a little cocaine, like, and you doesn't need much, right? But we are
At
pounding
first.
on average 30 teaspoons of sugar through our system. That's average. The people that come to me are 40, 50, 60 teaspoons of sugar a day.
Yeah.
And you are just shutting down. One of my main and I'm getting a little philosophical on you now, but one of my main thought issues over the time period now is that how in God's name can the limbic brain, if you study the work of different people, where the brain was built from the bottom up, run your heart, run your sex, run your food, and then we developed a frontal cortex, which is the control center, the brain, the processing, the meaning, and all that kind of stuff.
Thinking.
Our ability to speak and stuff. And how does the brain translate that it needs that hit of dopamine into, I can go out in a snowstorm to get ice cream?
Right.
How does it make that leap,
Mm-hmm.
and how does it keep that craving alive? And the only answer we've ever had, it may be better in the future, but the only answer we have now to eliminate that is abstinence.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't feed the beast.
That's a good, I'm going to feel that one right there.
Yeah,
Feed the
absolutely.
beast.
Yeah. There was another, let's see, there was something else I was going to ask him.
We can talk about water too, by the way. I think it's
Okay.
huge.
Yeah, it is definitely.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I do too. That's why I've been drinking this all the way through. And that's the other thing I don't think people realize, that this sugar on the nucleus accumbens is that's the actual pleasure center of the brain. And they've actually done the studies and found out glucose seriously does hit the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure center of the brain, the exact same way that cocaine does.
Yes.
So just like, and that's what I did a podcast on this too, talking about how a little bit of cocaine, some people can do that, but then you have to have more and more and more. It takes more and more to get the feeling. And sugar's doing the same thing. And just like with any drug, if you go through withdrawal, what you're doing is whatever that drug does, if that builds you up, picks you up, then your withdrawal is going to be the opposite. It's going to kick you down.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting here and you're sweating like crazy and your heart's racing, you have all these things going on, and then all of a sudden you quit sugar, and now you're down, you're depressed, and all this stuff, then you realize that was sugar that was doing that in the first place. So hopefully that'll help people realize, oh, maybe I do need to quit this. And I'm with you. I think if they can do cold turkey, by far, you almost have to. You've got to get it out of the house. You don't want the triggers. You don't want to be giving it to your kids. But anyway,
no, it's so true.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Well, we have gone over.
This
is we could talk
it.
to you so much longer, but
is there anything that we haven't hit on that you'd like to talk about or anything like that?
You've been very kind, and usually I say it takes the arc of a podcast about an hour, but I was able to get a lot more out because, first of all, you guys, compliments to you. You're more aware. Like, I go on a lot of not a lot, but enough keto or food-based, trainer-based podcasts.
Right.
And this is totally foreign to them in a lot of ways. So the questioning or the cadence, if you will, of the event is not the same as yours. So, kudos to you on that one. Anything else? I'm hopeful. Let me put it to you that way. I'm very hopeful to where we are in history. I'm really impressed with. We had Casey Means on back in the day, but Casey and Callie Means and what they're doing to bring awareness to this issue and the incestuousness of food and big food and big pharma and government and subsidies and all of this that we've talked about, some of it.
Mhm.
I'm very, that they've been asked to be on Rogan, and they've been,
Yep.
and then there was I don't know if you guys saw it, the Senate hearing where one senator was willing to put all these folks, and the food babe who's, bringing 400,000 signatures to Kellogg's. I'm
Right.
hopeful that this happens quicker than the cigarette thing.
Right.
Right.
The cigarette thing took 30 years, and most of it happened because there was a $1 trillion advertising campaign, and
Exactly.
trillion, and that's because the litigation dragged on for a decade. It was 10 years of front page news of the states suing the companies, and then the settlements for billions of dollars. Still not enough. It's not even close.
Right.
And we don't have that going on with the sugar. There's no, like, the people that are trying to get the messages out are, very small, you and me, and that's about it. There's not too many. So, but they don't have front page news every day. We don't have front page news.
And that's what makes it so hard, because we're actually fighting against mainstream media, huge drug companies, huge food companies, with all these advertising money and everything. And they have a lot to lose. I mean, it'd be nice if we could just say, well, one of the big first steps is quit advertising. They shouldn't have been. Drug companies were never allowed to advertise on television. Now they can. Now the food companies are advertising to everybody. So people don't really realize, they don't even realize this is an addiction. They just think this is what everybody does. And so that's why it's hard that's why we have to resort to writing books, do podcasts, do these programs, because we don't have the financing to get out there and actually try to alert more people, which is, but I do think that this is growing so much bigger. There's so many different seminars and conferences that we're going to all over the United States and all over the world.
Yeah.
We just haven't been to any except for in the United States. But I think it is becoming a lot more. People are becoming a lot more aware, because they realize, oh my gosh,
Well, just look around.
Yeah.
Like.
And that's what makes it easy. Look around. What has changed in the last 40, 50 years? And it was our food guidelines.
Yeah. Just look into grocery carts. That's all you got.
Oh yeah.
Just look at the body size and look in. It's not fat shaming. Believe me, I have my own opinions about that too.
Yeah.
But just look in the cart and look at the person. You can tell. It's very simple.
Yep.
But one of the things I want to thank you guys too is the interest in the kids, because at this juncture, with the amount of science going on, I think that it's arcing towards criminal to give children these products over
and advertise to them.
And the entirety of the Saturday morning cartoon thing is covered up with all these sugary stuff.
Yep.
And try and get a kid off of the idea that whatever their superhero is eating, and they're only 4 and they're in the grocery store and they're pulling on your shirt, like, give me this, give me, what I mean? It's like, quote unquote, starting them young is such a 50 years from now, they're going to say, they used to give sugar to kids.
Yeah, I know. No, they didn't. They gave that to kids.
It won't be illegal. I've often thought that maybe it would be a controlled substance, but I think it won't be illegal. I think it will be an adult treat like alcohol. And, you'll know the risks like alcohol,
Right.
And but you won't be giving it to children, and, pregnancy and, the first 4 or 5 years will be a sugar-free zone. I'm hoping, fingers crossed.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I mean, every day that a new study comes out, I get more and more energized,
Right.
It's because people want the science, right? They really do. They want the science, but I think the experience, and this is Dr. Lustig and I go back and forth all the time, is like, he got a law degree so that he could interface with the policymakers, right? I think there is the best thing I've heard lately is Callie Means saying that, which I never knew, and I don't want to ever go into politics, but this executive order possibility where if someone is really willing to take the heat, that an executive order could decimate the FDA, could stop the farm subsidies, could change the face of the policy down.
Yep.
But that said, I really do believe that this movement, if you will, is coming from grassroots. This is coming from the bottom up.
Right.
People like yourselves, me, and all the people on my summits and stuff, that they are working towards the education process so that people understand what's going on, you know. And look, I mean, I've had clients who didn't even know what a carbohydrate was.
Right. Right.
And,
Yeah, I've had people ask me what a carbohydrate is.
yeah. So
anything from a plant.
exactly.
If it's not from an animal and you're eating it, it's a carbohydrate basically.
Yeah. So anyway, we're waxing philosophical a little bit, and we're, you know, big picturing it, but I still believe it. I mean, I think in our lifetime we'll see major changes. I do.
Yeah, I sure hope so. I'm going to do everything I can. I mean, I truly feel it's my God-given passion to at least alert as many people as want to listen to me.
Yeah.
And before we go just real quick, I remember what I was going to say earlier when you were talking about the a lot of the withdrawal symptoms, and we're not in early withdrawal symptoms, but one of the biggest things you see is people are starving to death. I know what I tell people is that's because carbohydrate, besides everything we've already talked about, the carbohydrates only stay in your stomach for 20, 30 minutes, and then they get in the intestines and they're immediately absorbed. Right. And they only stay in the intestines for probably about the same thing, to where if you eat fat and meat, actually have good meat, that'll stay in your stomach for 2 to 4 hours. Then it stays in your intestines. And some people, depending on what you are, some people, it can stay in the intestines for 48 hours while it's slowly breaking down.
Yes.
So if you're having issues with hunger, eating real animal meat, real animal fat, real protein, that will curb that, and that'll help you get through that. What do you guys tell people? Do you go along the same lines, or what do you tell people that take care of their hunger?
Okay, so you're talking about an evolution again of my program. So my first coach was a vegetarian, and she's the person I got the 9-year-old because she had an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old. I forget how old she was, and her mother owned a bakery. Was not on board. Okay, she would bring the stuff over for the child and for the husband, and she was fine. And I've interviewed the world's most famous vegetarians. And one of the guys that I love is a guy named Gabriel Cousins. So Gabriel is a raw food vegan who has been raw food for 40 years. But in blood, he does dark field microscope blood tests for all these 40 years. And he has, in essence, reduced himself to a raw food keto diet. He eats greens, avocados, and olives. Now, Gabriel is 80 years of age and can do 1,500 push-ups in a row. Okay.
Why would you want to?
I said, you know, have you done this lately? He said, Mike, it takes too much time. And he's like, so the reason I tell you that is because my own evolution of, and I start to answer your question, I started this believing that as long as you're eating whole food, you could, you could walk out of the sugar thing. And all the vegetarians, they say the same thing. They say the same, no ultra processed carbohydrates, but most of their food products are ultra processed carbohydrates, tofu, right, and tempeh, and blah, 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 you know, grains and fruits. And right, it's just, you know, and they have difficulty with a lot of stuff. And personally, my evolution has been exactly what you described, is like my bowel movements, my change has been so, the only thing I can attribute it to is that what you said, the meat is being processed longer, satiating me more, you know, and, you know, it's just a complete switch around, you know, from giant bowel movements to, you know, once every 3 or 4 days sometimes. The only, and I'm eating the same volume of food, the same calorie intake, everything is the same. And I can tell you, it's a long story, but, you know, there's been a lot of healing in my face. I 7 years ago had adult acne, and rosacea still. I had, basal cell carcinomas from lifeguarding without hats or sunscreen. They were beginning, I don't know if I can show it to you, they were beginning to cut it off. They got scars on my nose and they were beginning to cut it off. All of that went away. Like when I gave up grains and fruit and all this stuff, right? And so I have contemporaries who will not work with vegetarians, okay? They cannot get them off sugar.
Right.
And I'm almost there, okay? Again, I've seen it happen, so I know it can be done, but I think the long-term potential is restrictive. I think you have a break from the ultra-processed carbohydrates to the grains and fruits and such. But me, when I did this experiment, I was 28 years, no flour, no sugar, no caffeine. And I still had my gums bled every day for my entire adult life into my late 50s. And when I changed my diet, it stopped immediately.
Yep.
Okay. And the most important part is that both my parents were dying of Alzheimer's at the time. Okay. One dementia, one Alzheimer's. And I was starting to get these cognitive lapses. And I'm scared to death, right? And I'm taking care of them, and that took about 3 or 4 months to. Now, I'm not talking about walking into a room with "where's my keys" kind of thing. This is like going from browser to browser,
right?
And I'm like, that went away. That took about 3 months. So I've lived it, experientially, and I've had a lot of people in my program and my coaches the same thing happen. Okay, and so. The answer to your question is, people ask me all the time, what do you eat? And I used to have that answer and I used to eat a lot of greens. I actually kind of was going to call my diet high green keto. And then I've just eliminated the greens too.
Yep.
Because my favorite was Brussels sprouts, and I could eat 2 pounds of Brussels sprouts.
Yeah.
To fill me up because it had so much fructose.
Yep.
All the greens have been hybridized to fructose.
Yep.
One of the things I do want to leave your folks is if they want to quit sugar, study fructose. Okay, that's the offending molecule.
Right.
So anyway,
and they can start by watching. Is it Robert Lustig's?
Lustig's
Lustig
viral video, 22 million views. Boring college lecture on.
I know, isn't that crazy?
He doesn't understand it. Nobody understands it.
He doesn't.
So if you guys want to watch it, it's called "Sugar: The Bitter Truth" on YouTube by Dr. Robert Lustig, and that video and Jason Fung's book about the obesity code.
Yeah,
I did both of those things in the first week that I started. That's when I first started finding out about this whole movement and how important nutrition is and how we're being manipulated by the drug companies, food companies, and all that. Yeah. So I agree. I think everybody should watch that. It'll be an eye opener.
So honestly, to answer your question, I am on the verge of this being my recommendation. I'm already to that. I believe people need to eat more animal products, more healthy fats. The reason Gabriel is successful, I said, Gabriel, that doesn't sound like enough food. And he goes, I don't eat that doesn't sound enough calories. He says, I don't eat for calories, Mike. I eat for energy.
Yep.
And, so it's like, calories, we don't even need to get into this. It's not a real measure of anything. It's a chemical reaction in your body, the food digestion, right?
Right. And even the energy is kind of a misnomer because people think that the body has to have glucose to use for energy. It's like, no, it doesn't. It works way better on fat than it does on glucose. I mean, you don't need it. And whatever your body does need, it can make it out of protein. It can make it out of fat. So you do not ever have to put a carbohydrate in your mouth ever, and you'll be perfectly fine.
Yeah. So I'm on the verge of, I like some of my contemporaries, you have to be eating some animal products or we're not gonna do well together. Yeah. And again, I think it happens quicker for folks. Yep. They're more satiated. It's easier. It's just easier.
Yep. That's what I thought. But anyway, so I know I'm carrying you way too far, but I really appreciate you giving us your time and letting my audience hear all the information that you have. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, if somebody wanted to follow you more, how would they get a hold of you, and what do they need to do?
Yeah, we brought the book home. The book was on Amazon. It's still on Amazon. You can get a hard copy there, but the digital copy is at sugaraddiction.com, and you can go and just grab it at sugaraddiction.com and grab a copy of the book.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the Quit Sugar Summit website is up all the time, gathering names. So if you know the event, so this is going to air after Thanksgiving or whatever, but the event is January the 6th this year, and we'll have another group of experts, so you can listen to that too. So
Yeah.
whatever works for you.
And how long is the summit?
It's
What exactly is that going to be?
7 straight days of about 7 or 8 speakers a day. It's all free. You don't have to pay for it. You can grab the package if you want, which then you can watch it whenever. But for 24 hours, new group of 7, 8 speakers is out, and
That's
it's
awesome.
it's a big event. Millions of people have watched it over the years. So.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
Have
we'll
a
have
feeling
to
we
check
probably
it
will
out.
be too.
Yeah, definitely.
Good.
So
Looking to it.
thank you so much, Mike, for doing this.
Thank you.
And I hope the audience, I hope you guys, I hope you got something out of this. I hope you've realized that this is no little thing. This is huge. Carbohydrate addiction, we're basically kind of being forced into it. But as long as you realize that, change who you're listening to, and start looking at people who really do care about your health, and we're not trying to tell you what to do for money. So, Mike, you helped us out.
Sell, right? There's nothing to sell but whole food, and we don't sell food. So.
Yeah, right.
That's right. That's right. But anyway, that's all we have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this. As always, have a fantastic week, and always make simple, healthy choices to live a quality life.